Good evening again, and I wanted to be sure that you received a copy of some correspondence on this issue, and I'm not sure if it made it out to the council, so I brought copies along. I'll go ahead and disperse to you. Thank you. It does appear fairly large, but a large portion of this is actually a copy of a section of the City of Pullman Conservation Water Conservation Plan. And that correspondence is from local resident Nancy Cheney regarding the item at hand. The Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, PBAC, as we call them, implemented and developed a plan for approval back in 1992 that addressed water issues within the basin. That plan was subsequently approved by all of the entity members of PBAC, the counties, the cities, and the universities that were members at that time. That plan has been in effect for over 20 years, and PBAC felt it was time to provide some form of an update to the plan. And so took that on about a year and a half ago, started working its way through chapter by chapter through the plan at various meetings over that time. The committee, PBAC, felt that it did not want to pursue the option of rewriting the plan in its entirety, and instead took the approach of creating, in essence, an addendum to the plan that essentially gave an update on the status of the items that were within the plan. In that manner, we weren't starting from scratch. It was really a kind of a check-in as to how things were proceeding, were the assumptions that were made, proving out were the efforts that were being undertaken or promoted within the groundwater plan, having the effect that was anticipated, things of that nature. So PBAC has worked its way through all the chapters of that plan and come up with updates to attach to each chapter along the way. One of those sections in the plan, the groundwater management plan, included a series of action plans for each of the entities that are within PBAC or that were part of the plan development itself. The City of Moscow, of course, has one of those. And the entity's representatives were asked to modify or update those action plans based on current conditions and situations that are facing us today as compared to 1992. So as a staff representative, I undertook that process to create a new version or an updated version, if you will, of the 1992 action plan items for City of Moscow. And what's in your packet this evening are a couple of things. The first item you will see is a clean copy of the 2014, July 2014 Moscow Action Plan. But I would ask that you turn past that and go to the next 2 pages, which are a comparative version, a summary, that shows each of the bulleted items from the 1992 version, and then following that, a second version of the 2014 update. And I say second version because the first version was presented to the Public Works Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago, had some comments generated, some suggested edits generated at that meeting. Those edits have been made and are incorporated in what is now called the 2014 version number 2, which is what's before you this evening. I was asked to bring this through council so that council could look at the suggested changes, the 2014 version, and provide approval of that before we take it back to PBAC to be included in the update to the 1992 groundwater management plan. At committee, we went through all of the items that are here. I'm not proposing to do that this evening, but I will try to point out a couple of what I guess are perhaps the more significant items along the way. First off, I should mention that about a half a dozen of them are what I would consider to be complete. So there were tasks that essentially stated that, adopt a code or take this action or create a plan or a program. We've done those things. And so they're just noted as being completed, and I'm recommending that they just be deleted from the action plan because they're done, or they're just ongoing programs that will continue as a matter of course. Of the items remaining, probably the first one is the one that probably received the most discussion at PBAC. This is the one that has to do with the 1% annual growth target and the 125% maximum production target based on the 1986 and 1981 through 85 average production numbers, respectively. The original version from 92 really was perhaps a bit more stringent in the choice of language. In that second sentence, it talks about at no time shall the accumulated total pumping exceed 125. In the modified version, and this was something that was discussed with some of the PBAC membership, was a modification to attempt to limit the accumulated total pumping to a targeted maximum of 125%. That was done in recognition of the fact that cities do grow and the characteristics of the water producers within the basin have changed. As a collection, we have actually reduced our consumption from the 1992 levels, which is somewhat astounding when you think about it and the type of changes that have happened in the last 22 years. Individually, though, that's not always the case. The cities, of course, have continued to increase as population increases, demand on the supply increases. The universities have gone the other direction. They've had a decline. And in the case of the University of Idaho, a fairly significant decline, largely due to the reuse of treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant. That has made huge strides in their water usage and benefits the entire basin. So the language modification here was really trying to get to the issue of looking at the basin as a whole rather than tying it just to individual entities, if you will. And I think I see a question here.
Dan?
Yeah. The 1 million gallons per year that are listed here, is that these are just Moscow's numbers, or are these the basin's numbers?
Those are just Moscow's numbers that are listed here. Yes.
One thing about it, you still have things you want to comment on, Les, before we get into discussion on this?
Well, just one or two things, if I could. One of the items that is in here, 1, 2, 3, about 4 bullets down, 4 and 5 actually, talk about conservation and conservation devices. Well, the city is doing a pretty extensive program on conservation, a lot of public outreach, education, dealing with things like xeriscape gardens, demonstration gardens, helping folks with free devices, those types of things. We're also in the process of creating a conservation plan that will be coming to council yet this summer that will address a lot of what we do in conservation and propose additional steps, such as the toilet exchange program that's discussed earlier this evening, toilet rebate program. Those types of things will be in that plan under some of the proposed options that the city could consider implementing. I bring that up because in here we're indicating that we will continue those conservation programs. I know in Ms. Cheney's letter, that was one of the items she touched on, was trying to make that program as robust as possible, providing a copy of the Pullman conservation section from their comp plan, as support documentation to that. We did add 2 goals, so not just modification. One of these I had brought forward originally, which was to explore possible expansion of the wastewater treatment plant effluent reuse. That's something we've been addressing under our Phase 5 treatment plant studies, looking at how could we expand use of that and help not only the plant, but help reduce overall water consumption for irrigation purposes. So that's the first of the added goals. And the second was added at committee, which is continue examination of an alternate water supply options as approved by the City Council. That's in recognition of the surface water reservoir study and other alternate water supply options that we have been undertaking the last couple of years in our studies of possible routes forward. So I think with that, I would try to take questions.
One of the things here in Moscow we can be proud of,
I look back on the PBAC reports, and we've done a very good job, in my estimation, on
conservation, and that effort needs to continue. And I like this the added goals of continued examination of alternative water supply, because someday we are going to definitely have to address that as I see it, so. And even though this isn't a public hearing, I'm going to let council speak, but if there's any people that would like to speak on this too, I'm going to let folks come up and talk. So, Walter, you had something you wanted to
Yes, a question for staff, probably Gary. Ms. Cheney's letter is dated June the 26th. Do you know when the city received it?
I do not know.
It was after committee met.
City clerk informs me that she was out of the office, received it on her cell phone, smartphone, but it was received on the 26th, but because of circumstances was not distributed.
It's addressed to the Moscow City Council. Is there an explanation as to why we're handed it tonight, 9 days after the city got it?
Can't really say, except that it was received by the city clerk. I don't know how to respond to that, other than,
Mr. Mayor, I was all prepared to work on approving this tonight, but based upon the fact that we've got a rather extensive letter with items in it that I may or may not agree with in the long run, I'm not prepared to read through these tonight and make a decision on them. I'd make a motion this item be tabled until the next council meeting. Give us a chance to study this.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion by Walter to table this until the next council meeting, until we can, council has time to study it. It was seconded by Dan. And so I will go with the roll from Art.
Aye.
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 no.
Okay, so you got 5-1 to table this thing, so it will be tabled until the next council meeting.
And I may or may not agree with you.
You get to do the presentation again, just like
Short
the folks that
version.
want to comment can comment on at that time.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
perhaps the Public Works Finance could pick up some of these things at the next meeting and work through them. Maybe that would be
If you
helpful.
want, if you
I
want
mean,
to,
I'm
you want
just
to
making a suggestion that
We
that would
certainly
be,
can bring them through.
It seems like
We do
that
have
would
an
be
abbreviated meeting. We only have an hour this next time, so
sure.
we will bring that
Maybe
to the
we
chair
could
to prioritize those
work
items.